Alright, welcome back. This is part 6 of the PaK 40 on an RSO chassis MiniArts kit, and honestly, it's a lovely little kit. I'm enjoying it, but I'm also making a few changes as we go. If you've been following the series, you'll have seen the earlier work. Today we're concentrating on the ammo platform and the gun mount interface. I decided to add a scratch build storage area for the ammo rounds. As you can see, I'm priming out the combat platform using Mr. Surfacer Mahogany, which is kind of a brown color. What you'll notice as this video goes along is that even though I've got this primed out, and then later you'll see that it's in a red primer as well, I tried using some of my AFE Club ammo that I have, and I found that the build was not sufficient for fitting all those pieces. So I've had to come back later and rebuild it again.
So this one I made a lot thinner.
First step was priming the scratch build parts with Mr. Surfacer. I originally built the platform by eye using the Aber brass platform as a reference, but after trial fitting some AFE Club ammo into it, I discovered the rounds were too big for the space. Back to the bench. I rebuilt the platform using slimmer styrene so the ammo flooring and mount would all sit properly together. I've also done some resin casting to make the metal floor plates that cover the ammo bay. Those plates are thin and crisp in resin and do a lot to sell the real world look. The resin floor plates will require a lot of sanding to get it to the right scaled thickness. There are a few tiny square detail pieces to add to the underside. Following that, then it's on to mounting holes. Following that, then it's on to the mounting holes for the gun. Because I scratch built the understructure, I need to carefully lay out and drill holes so that the gun mount tabs will seat exactly where they should. For this, I use my Fordham rotary tool. I like it because the foot pedal gives control over the variable speed I can use. I like it because the foot pedal control gives me fine variable speed so that I don't melt or chew up the styrene. I bought this tool for some jewelry making classes I took a number of years ago to do fine carving regarding lost wax casting. And so it's great when I need delicate control. A Dremel at full tilt tends to be too aggressive for this kind of work. The Fordham lets me ease in. I start with a small drill to locate the holes, then move up to a larger ball-shaped burr to carefully open and shape them so the mount tabs will drop in without stress. Slow, patient, test fit, adjust. That's the workflow. You'll see me test the mount a few times and tweak until it's happy. Stick around. Next, we'll tidy the mount, finish the floor plates, and get that gun seated solidly on the platform.
So I made a thinner one, and I made an even thinner one than that one. Okay, so here's a little test fit of my... So Where is that one? That's supposed to be handy all the time. So I snipped off these little tongues on here. Make them flush. I don't need to drill a hole into the bottom of this base because it's just not worth it. It's a big pain. You can see here I kind of screwed up in the placement anyways. So there's 2 holes in the bottom of this gun mount, and they mount onto these 2 things that are on the gas tank. So that really helps with the alignment of all this. And you can see, oops. Here, let's do that again. Okay, so that goes there like that, right? And then that's nicely flush there. So that's great. So the only thing left to do is to glue on the 2 front supports, and I'll do that.
Two very boring minutes later.
All right, that should be thin enough, I think. I'll cut them down. Maybe I have to sand them separately. So I gotta cut these out now. Okay, so where are we at here? I gotta sand this off. Okay, on the back of this, there's these little square pieces on each of the corners and right there. So I'm going to cut some of this plastic up. And replace it. So when I cut, I don't try to cut everything all at once. I just drag the knife lightly across several times until it's through. But I never force it, because the minute I try to force it, the knife is going to slip out of where I want it to go. All right, so is that gonna work? Yeah. I'm going to paint this in place. All right, so I primed that out. All right. Okay, I've cleaned up all the plastic that I've added here along the edges. So that's good. So I took the gas tank out and the drive shaft was all warped and bent out of shape. So stupid me, I'm replacing it with a piece of rod, but it will never be seen, but it just bugged me. Anyway, so I'm gonna tape all this off. The paint scheme I'm going for, the bottom half is going to be Thunkel Grau because maybe they took this chassis and they took the top parts off and they made a one with the PaK 40. All right, guys, it's been a while since I worked on this PaK 40 RSO. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna paint the gun first, just so I can get back on track. And I'm gonna paint the barrel gray, because that's what it's called for. Some of you may know, and some of you may not know, that the barrels were often replaced. And when they were replaced, they often had a gray primer. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm not gonna do any chipping on it, but I will do chipping on this stuff. This is gonna be a Dunkelgelb color and camo. So I'm gonna carefully airbrush this gray. Take it from me, you should paint this barrel first before you build it, because now it's gonna be more difficult for me to not hit other areas of this, but I'm a professional, I can hack it. We've all gotten a shot of Hairspray, and then I'm going to paint it with the Dunkelgelb.
Today we're doing one of my favorite weathering steps, the good old Hairspray chipping technique. Now, if you've never tried this before, don't worry, it's easier than it looks. And once you've done it a couple of times, you'll wonder how you ever painted German armor without it. So, what you're seeing here is the top color going over the Hairspray layer I put down earlier. So here I'm just giving it a once-over, checking the fit of everything before committing to any glue.
Close it up.
Always worth a second to do that. Saves you from future heartbreak and colorful language.
Although I wonder if I should paint those. I should paint those a silver color.
Now I've got it down on the bench and we're moving on to some interior detail painting. I'm starting over on the left-hand side, that cluster of linkages, rods, and that little steering assembly. I'm going with a fine brush and a bit of metallic gunmetal, just picking out the steel parts. Take your time here, no need to rush. A little touch on the rod, a little highlight on the hinge, and suddenly it starts looking like a piece of machinery instead of a lump of plastic. You can see as I tilt it that everything's starting to pop now. Those metal tones against the panzer yellow really bring the interior to life. And now we're moving to the outside of the cab, and I'm finally gluing the top plate into place. All the interior details are painted now, so we can close it up. I'll tell you though, next time I might leave this part off until after the Hairspray chipping. Having that extra bit of access inside would have made life a little easier. Live and learn, right? Tiny bit of glue, ease it into position, make sure it's sitting square, and that's that. Now, before we get rolling, full disclosure, somehow through a mysterious combination of laziness, distraction, and good old-fashioned jet scale incompetence, there is no video whatsoever of me actually spraying the camouflage colors. It just didn't happen. The camo was there, the camera was there, I was there, but apparently none of us was working together that day. So we're jumping straight to the fun part instead, the Hairspray chipping. And now that the paint has had a little time to settle, I'm coming in with a damp brush and just working those edges. You don't want to flood it, just enough moisture to wake up the hairspray under the surface. Right here, I'm focusing on the hinges and edges of the access hatch. Those are the spots that take a beating in real life. Boots, tools, dirty hands, all that good field abuse. And you can see how the paint just starts to break and lift naturally. That's the beauty of this method. The model decides where the chips go. You just guide it. I'm not gouging at it, just gentle pressure, tiny circles, tap, tap, tap. Think of it as persuading the paint rather than forcing it. And every now and then you'll hit that sweet spot where the layers separate perfectly and you'll get that sharp little scratch or chip that looks totally authentic. Now I'm moving further down the panel, working those high contact areas. Around the edges, you'll notice the chips get a little more aggressive. That's exactly what we want. Interior panels stay cleaner, outer corners get chewed up. Makes perfect sense. And as I rotate the piece, you can see the lovely variation coming through. Some spots are barely touched, others have that nice exposed bits of primer and steel. This is where the whole paint job starts to look alive. And that's the Hairspray stage done for now. Nice and subtle, controlled, but still with that gritty Eastern Front personality. And we'll keep building this up with washes and pigments later. The German 7.5 centimeter Panzer Abwehrkanonenvierzig, better known as the PaK 40, was the backbone of Germany's anti-tank defense during the Second World War. Designed by Rheinmetall Borsig between 1939 and 1941, it entered service in 1942. Just as German forces were discovering that their existing guns couldn't cope with the new generation of Allied tanks, particularly the Soviet T-34 and KV-1. The PaK 40 changed that almost overnight. Rugged, simple, and devastatingly effective, it became one of the most feared weapons on the battlefield. Early in the war, Germany's main anti-tank gun was the light 3.7 centimeter PaK 36, soon replaced by the 5 centimeter PaK 38. Both were quick and mobile, but when the T-34 appeared on the Eastern Front, their shells simply bounced off its sloped armor. In 1940, the Army had already asked Rheinmetall to design a new 75mm gun based on the PaK 38 layout, but built entirely of steel to save on scarce alloys. It wasn't a priority until Barbarossa made the need impossible to ignore. Development accelerated, and by the end of 1941, the first PaK 40s were on their way to the Eastern Front. Those early guns proved exactly what the Wehrmacht needed: reliable stopping power. By the spring of 1942, 44 were in service. By year's end, more than 1,300. Production eventually topped 20,000, making it the most numerous anti-tank gun of the war. It armed towed batteries, self-propelled mounts like the Martyr series, and even served as the basis for the Panzer IV's long-barreled KWK-40 tank gun. Wherever German infantry fought tanks, the PaK 40 was there. Technically, it was a 75mm gun with a 46 caliber barrel, about 3.5 meters long, and a hydro-pneumatic recoil system housed beneath it. In firing position, it weighed roughly 1,400 kilograms, heavy for a field piece, and the crew of 5 or 6 couldn't move it far without a towing vehicle. The gun's split-trailed carriage could traverse 65 degrees, and elevation ranged from -5 to +22 degrees. Muzzle velocity reached about 790 meters per second, with standard armor-piercing ammunition, producing a flat, hard-hitting trajectory. In direct fire, it was accurate out to 1,800 meters, and with high explosive shells, could lob fire almost 8 kilometers. Its semi-automatic breech made for fast firing, 10 to 15 rounds per minute when the crew was well trained. Ammunition variety was one of the PaK 40's strengths. The standard round, the Panzergranate 39, was an armor-piercing ballistic cap shell with a small explosive filler. At 500 meters, it could punch through 96 millimeters of armor at a 30-degree angle, enough to pierce T-34's glacis or Sherman's front plate. A special tungsten core round, the Panzergranate 40 was even faster, close to 1 kilometer per second, capable of penetrating around 120 millimeters of armor. But tungsten was scarce, and those rounds were reserved for emergencies. There was also a shaped charge shell, the HL/B, which used chemical energy rather than velocity and could defeat 75 millimeters of armor at any range. For soft targets or field support, crews used the Brenngranat 34, a high explosive shell with a 700-gram charge, ideal for infantry positions or light vehicles. With this range of ammunition, the PaK-40 was not only a tank killer, but a flexible battlefield gun. In combat, its effectiveness was legendary. Reports from 1942 and 43 describe PaK-40 batteries halting Soviet armored attacks single-handedly. A well-camouflaged gun, its low silhouette, barely 1.25 meters tall, could destroy several tanks before being located. The price of that power, though, was weight. Once dug in, a PaK-40 couldn't be manhandled away without a half-track or truck. Crews often had to abandon it if the front collapsed. To mitigate this, they positioned prime movers close by undercover, always planning an escape route. Organization was standardized. 3 guns per platoon, 3 platoons per battery, 9 guns supporting an infantry regiment. Ideally, they were towed by the SD KFZ 7 or 11 half-tracks, but shortages meant trucks and even horse teams were common, especially on the Eastern Front's muddy tracks. By 1943, Germany faced another problem: mobility. The Eastern Front's terrain often swallowed wheeled vehicles, and towing a PaK-40 through mud was nearly impossible. Enter the Raupenschlepper Ost, or RSO, a small, fully tracked tractor built by Steyr in Austria, originally designed as a supply hauler through snow and mud. The RSO was simple, slow, and incredibly reliable. Its flat track suspension and high clearance let it crawl where trucks bogged down. Commanders soon realized that instead of towing the PaK-40 behind an RSO, they might mount the gun directly on top. Steyr received the order in mid-1943 to create a cheap, mobile anti-tank platform. The result was a 7.5 centimeter PaK-40/4 Auf RSO, essentially an RSO tractor with its cab replaced by a low armored front plate and an open fighting deck. The gun sat on a reinforced pedestal, retaining its original shield, and could traverse a full 360 degrees. Trials that autumn showed it could handle the recoil without tipping, and Hitler approved a limited production run. 50 were ordered for testing with Army Group South, and though only a handful finished that year, he envisioned hundreds per month by mid-1944. In the field, results were mixed. The RSO PaK-40 gave infantry a self-propelled gun that didn't need to be unhitched or dug in. It could drive into position, fire almost immediately, and relocate, something a towed gun couldn't dream of. But its weaknesses were just as clear. The tractor's top speed was barely 30 kilometers an hour on road, half that off-road. Armor was minimal, 5 to 10 millimeters of thin plate around the front and sides, barely enough to stop rifle bullets. The open top and rear left the crew exposed to artillery fragments and the weather alike. The gun's high mounting gave the vehicle a silhouette of nearly 2.5 meters, easy to spot, and when it fired broadside, recoil could jolt the entire chassis. Crews joked grimly that RSO stood for Rollender Sarge Ost, the rolling coffin of the East. Life aboard was harsh. 4 men crewed the vehicle: driver, commander, gunner, and a loader. The ammunition racks, about 26 to 28 rounds, were cramped and awkward to reach, slowing reloads. The little gasoline engine was loud and overheated easily, making concealment difficult. Still, in the right conditions, ambushes, defensive screens, or covering retreats, the RSO PaK 40 proved useful. It could deliver the first shot faster than any towed gun and offered true all-terrain mobility. Yet by the spring of 1944, after numerous reports of breakdowns and losses, production was cancelled. Only around 60 to 80 were built, most seeing action on the Eastern Front. Those that survived served until the war's end, usually in static defensive roles. In retrospect, the RSO PaK 40 was a stopgap, an inventive but flawed answer to a desperate need. It combined one of the best anti-tank guns of the war with one of the simplest vehicles, creating a hybrid that worked in theory but not in prolonged combat. The PaK 40 itself, however, remained a masterpiece, reliable, powerful, and adaptable. Even in 1945, dug-in PaK 40s were knocking out Allied armor as Germany collapsed around them. It was the weapon that defined German anti-tank doctrine, an elegant piece of engineering that left a lasting mark on military design.
So I made a bit of a boo-boo because I made these to be closed, right? And I don't want that because when I go to do this, I'm gonna have ammo in there and I wanna have it like this. So I'm gonna use a second set that I have from another kit, and I'm gonna do the right way where it's folded down. Okay, well here it is with the AFV Club ammo, and you know what? Unfortunately, it's a bit long. So what I've done is I've trimmed one down. You can see here how much longer it is.
So it's going to look good. It might not be exact, but I don't know. Let's take a look at the Aber one and see, do these things fit in there? Yeah, they fit fine.
The hairspray technique is one of the simplest and most powerful ways to create realistic paint wear on an armored vehicle. It works because of chemistry and timing. When you spray a thin layer of hairspray between two coats of paint, you're laying down a water-reactive film. Once the top layer is dry, you can reintroduce water, soften that film, and lift the paint in tiny natural flakes, just like real chipped and weathered paint. It's a method that feels almost like magic the first time you see it happen. The paint doesn't peel in predictable lines, it comes up in irregular, authentic patterns that look like metal fatigue, crew wear, or the effects of weather and time. It's especially effective on armor. Vehicles that live rough are constantly exposed to the elements and show the scars of service. The process starts with a solid primer coat. That's your foundation, the color you want exposed when the paint chips away. That could be red oxide primer, dark steel, or an earlier camouflage color. Once the layer is dry, you mist on a light, even coat of hairspray. Don't flood it, just a couple of thin passes. When the hairspray dries, it becomes a delicate barrier between layers. Now comes your main paint job. Spray your base color, your camouflage, or your winter whitewash as you normally would. Thin, even coats, nothing heavy. Then let it dry, but not cure. This is important. If the top coat fully hardens, it won't respond to water. If it's still too soft, it'll smear. The sweet spot is when it feels dry to the touch, usually around 30 minutes to an hour depending on the paint and the temperature. When you're ready to chip, start small. Dampen a brush with clean water and touch it to the surface. Let the moisture sit for about 30 seconds so that it can penetrate the paint and reach the hairspray underneath. You'll start to see the surface darken slightly. That's your cue that it's softening. Then take a short, stiff brush and begin to work the area in gentle circles. You'll see paint lifting off in irregular specks and streaks. If you want scratches, use a toothpick or a fine brush handle. If you want broader wear, like scuffed fenders or worn panels, use a cut-down toothbrush or a small sponge. The beauty of this method is how controllable it becomes once you get a feel for it. A little more water makes larger flakes. Less water and softer brushing makes small, subtle chipping. You can layer the effect too. Go heavier on the hull sides and fenders, lighter on vertical plates or turrets, and leave sheltered areas almost untouched. Think about where crew boots would tread, where hands would grab, and where heat or vibration would break down paint. That's where wear naturally appears. The timing of each stage changes the result. If you work quickly after painting, the chips are larger and more dramatic. Wait longer and they become smaller, tighter, and harder to form. Humidity also plays a part. In a damp room, the hairspray reactivates faster. In dry conditions, you might need a bit more water or time. It's a feel. After a few models, you start to read the paint like skin, knowing exactly when it's ready to yield. For winter whitewash or temporary camouflage, hairspray is unbeatable. Paint the tank in its normal color scheme. Spray your hairspray barrier, then airbrush a thin coat of white paint on top. Once dry, re-wet it and scrub slightly. The white coat flakes and fades just like real distemper chalk, exposing the color beneath. Add a few vertical strokes with a damp flat brush and you get the look of melted snow and streaked grime. It's that simple and that convincing. Sometimes the process doesn't go perfectly, and that's fine. If nothing chips, the top coat's too hard. Score it gently with a needle and use warm water. If it peels in sheets, you've either sprayed too much hairspray or soaked it too heavily. If it turns mushy, the hairspray wasn't fully dry before painting. The technique teaches patience and restraint. It rewards light touch over brutal force. After chipping, seal your work with a very thin coat of clear varnish to lock it down before moving on to washes, streaks, and pigments. That prevents the weathering fluids from disturbing your paintwork later. The hairspray technique isn't just about showing damage. It's about telling the story of a vehicle's life. Layers of paint become layers of time. Each chip and scratch says something about where the machine has been, who handled it, and how hard it worked. On a tank, a tractor, or an old truck, it turns color into character. Whether you're recreating a frozen whitewash Panzer, a mud-streaked RSO gun tractor, or a North African veteran with sand-scoured fenders, hairspray chipping gives you the power to capture that lived-in realism. It's one of those rare techniques that's both simple and endlessly nuanced, the kind of process that keeps you experimenting even after you've mastered it.
Got a bloody hornet in here with me.
Okay, obviously we've got a little bit more of this hairspray technique to do, and this is on the fighting platform. So like before, just adding a little bit of water to help break down the surface and get to the hairspray underneath, which will allow the paint to come away from the primer color. Okay guys, I'm going to wrap this video up here. It's not perfect, but I'm getting tired of working on it, and hopefully you've gotten something out of it that's useful for your own modeling. Alright guys, I'm going to wrap this video up. I've been working on it for a long time and I'm starting to get really tired of it. So hopefully you've garnered some information that might be useful to your own modeling. If so, that's great. It served its purpose. Sorry if some of it was a bit boring and confusing and whatever, but that's the way it is. I'm going to wrap this one up and move on to the next one. So, in the meantime and in between time, that's another edition of Jet Scale Models. Y'all come back now, you hear?
When I grow up, I want to be just like Jet. Bitter, resentful, and moving to Thailand.